we went from 8 employees to 40, and we had an offer to buy our business for 10 times what it had been valued at in year 12. I saw this, it felt magical, to be honest. And all I did was kind of take by faith that this roadmap could work. And I think the reason I had gotten to that point is, like I said, I was kind of out of ideas. Let me follow something that was based on research that showed what other people had learned. It was based on research of other business owners and businesses. I thought, okay, well, I should at least give it a try. And when we did, we just saw this explosive growth.
Welcome to Mindset Mastery Moments, the best growth mindset podcast, recognized by Million Podcasts and ranked as a top mindset podcast by FeedSpot. We're proud to be in the top 1% on Listen Notes. Join Dr. Alisa Whyte as we explore powerful insights and strategies to elevate your mindset. Let's dive in.
All right, disruptors, let me ask you something. What if the reason your business feels chaotic isn't because you're failing, but because you are growing wrong? Not too slow, not too fast, just misaligned. And that's one of my favorite words these days. See, most people think revenue drives complexity. But what if I told you it's actually your people? And if you don't understand that, you will by the time you build something that breaks you. Today's conversation, this is for the entrepreneur who's building, but secretly drowning. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Mindset Mastery Moments. I'm your host, of course, Dr. Alisa, the #1 mindset disruptor. And today, we are not just talking business. We are talking structure, survival, and scale. Because too many people are building businesses that look successful on paper. And you know what? What paper, girl? Really? On the internet, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, flashy brands, nice websites, all the stuff, but internally, they're barely holding it together. And today's guest, he figured out exactly why. We are speaking with Mr. Matthew Pohl. He is the founder and CEO of ReWild Group, an entrepreneur who grew his company X in just 3 years. Listen, I am here with my book and my pen. Y'all ready? And he exited for 8 figures. But here's what makes his story different. He didn't just build success. He reverse engineered it. From growing up in a family that lost everything and ended up all the way on food stamps. Listen, food stamps are here for a reason. To leaving corporate security, to building a scalable framework that helps businesses grow without chaos. He created something called Organizational ReWilding. Matthew, can't wait to talk to you today. As an entrepreneur myself, I can't wait to hear all these things that you have rewilled to help us. Welcome to Mindset Mastery Moments. And in your own words, tell us who you are, what you do, and how did you get started doing this stuff in the first place?
Yeah, Lisa, I really appreciate you having me on, and great introduction. I'm not much different than any other entrepreneur out there. Kind of started off in the corporate world, worked at the Federal Reserve Bank out of college, and then Arthur Andersen for a number of years, and started my own business in the mid-30s. Had 4 small children at the time and struggled that first year. We went down to one vehicle, Toyota Corolla, and all 4 of our kids shoved in the back seat. Maybe you can't do that these days, but back then we got by with it. But yeah, I've seen the hard parts of being an entrepreneur and know the thrills of success as well.
Yeah, so definitely. And you all hear me say it's rewilding. What? I had to ask, why rewilding? What does that mean for you?
Yeah, so rewilding is really a biological scientific term. It talks about how ecosystems, which are, highly interrelated dynamic systems, can become out of balance, right? Oftentimes it's human intervention that causes that imbalance. One of the most prominent stories of rewilding occurs in Yellowstone National Park. And the idea of rewilding is that you look at this ecosystem that's out of balance, and you identify what's missing. And when that element that's missing is placed into that system, it rebalances. It comes back to its natural wildness. So it rewilds where the
Wow.
term comes from. And in
Yeah.
Yellowstone, what had happened is 60 years ago, well, I should say 6 years back from the 1990s, the gray wolf had been totally eliminated from that ecosystem. And what happened over those following decades is that the elk overran the park and were literally overgrazing and destroying the entire ecosystem of that park.
Wow.
When the scientists looked at that, they said, "Okay, what's wrong?" And they thought, "Well, one thing that's missing is the wolf." And so they
Mm,
reintroduced it, chain reaction. I would not go through all the details, but it impacted literally the entire ecosystem of the park down to the point where it actually changed how the rivers and streams flowed through the park because it changed the vegetation and everything around it. So that's
mm,
really what rewilding is. We identify what's seen within a business because we see it as an ecosystem, a human ecosystem. And
mhm,
it's not a machine where you just go in and tweak this little gear here and make a little adjustment here and then everything else stays the same. No, because there's humans involved, you can't just see it as a machine. So you have to identify what's missing. And then when you infuse what's missing, it has this ripple effect, just like the wolf in Yellowstone, and amazing things happen. So that's what rewilding is about in science and what organizational rewilding is in our framework.
I love it. So let's start here because people see the exit, but they don't see the fire that built it. You went from entrepreneurial success as a kid to losing everything. So tell us in your process of rewilding, how did that moment shape how you think about business today?
Well, growing up, I was the youngest of four. My parents had a business. I grew up in Iowa, and my parents had a business for 25 years. It was the only thing I knew. I was born and raised in one home, and my parents, I would say, had achieved kind of that upper middle class level of success. My dad had a really strong business, but like many business owners, it was so dependent on him. And so there was kind of a cap to how big he could get, but their business employed my mother, my grandpa, my aunt, and a couple other individuals. So it was very family oriented in that. And when I was going into high school, this would have been in the early 80s, and the economy was bad. The Midwest, where I was growing up, had experienced a drought.
Mhm.
And basically, my parents came to a place where they could no longer sustain the business. And so they
Mhm.
looked to their store one day, turned off the lights, locked the door, and walked away from 25, 30 years. And I didn't really realize it as time. I was too young, really, in some ways. But my father, who had put so much of himself into that business, like every entrepreneur does, he never really recovered. He was always searching for something. It was like he was missing something ever, the years that he lived after that. And so, we went from, like I said, upper middle class family. We were taking vacations once a year. We had, plenty of things and uh, to a place where my parents were on food stamps and going to the food lines to get cheese and necessities. And it was dramatic. My dad had to take a job as a dishwasher, to
Mhm.
try to make ends meet. And so it was a stark contrast, I would say.
From the life you knew, yeah. So what did that teach you about a scarcity mindset versus an ownership mindset?
Well, I think what it did for me is, first of all, my dad was the hardest working person I had ever seen up to that point, and one of the two hard workers in my lifetime. He was so dedicated to his work. So
Mhm.
he taught me how to work hard. But I think what it motivated me to do was that I had to push myself to be successful. I actually felt coming out of high school that my parents might be dependent on me for their
Right.
financial success. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of kids do that, right? That's not too uncommon. My
Not for
parents did. My parents rebounded and, they ended up they moved out to Colorado and, kind of got a new start. and did fine. Their story ends up like a good American story. They were fine. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, I think it was just that motivation to go apply myself, to work hard, and that was really fuel that came out of there. But I think for some people, it would have scared them to
Right.
a business owner later. And but I recall when I got married, I told my wife, I want to have 4 kids. I want to get a master's degree and I want to own my own business. And it's weird because I mean, I had 4 kids. So I think a lot of our family gets imprinted on us. I think that was probably
Yeah.
a pretty strong imprint on me.
Right. And here, I love it because most people turn pain don't really turn pain into position. They turn it into fear and they are like, I've listened to men just around your age saying, I'm at that age where my dad lost it all and
Mhm.
I'm freaking out. Dr. Alisa, because things are not looking really good for me in this business. But you made that decision. I'm going back instead of playing safe. I am going back to entrepreneurship regardless. So you left corporate with a steady, stable check and you went all in. Was that confidence or was it calculated risk?
Um, I think a little bit of both, possibly. Part of it I would just say is sheer ignorance. It was, I
Which
mean,
ignorance is bliss, you
It
know?
it can be, right? It can be a powerful tool. I mean, if I wrote down where we were as a
Uh-huh.
family,
Uh-huh.
uh, no and I showed that to somebody, a coach or something, no one would say,
Feel like you're
"Perfect,
crazy.
Matt. Let's go start the business," right? No one would have said that. I mean, we
Right.
literally our youngest was in kindergarten, we had a good amount of savings, but turns out not nearly a bunch. I had never run a business. I didn't know really how to start it. Everything, just like every business owner, we just kind of jump
Mhm.
in the pool. We start swimming as hard as we can. And
Mhm.
it actually took us almost 9 months. It was a specialty consulting business, and so each project is pretty big, but there's not too many of them, and it took us almost 9 months to get our first project. So my wife and I
Mhm.
were going in to our little rundown office and, looking at each other like, "Okay, when's the work gonna come?" And, I was doing what I thought I had to do, but I was really clueless. So I think that's where the ignorance came in.
Mhm.
But over time, we started to figure it out. We started to have success. We got that first project, the second project, the third project, and that went well. For about 12 years, we had a good, solid, what I would call lifestyle business. It was
Mm,
paying for our family, it was
that's
paying
good.
for the children, and, we
Mhm.
we were doing okay. And
Mhm.
but also what we saw is that after some years of early growth, we kind of hit the ceiling and we couldn't figure out how to get past that. And so it
Mm,
was really in year 12 where there was this aha moment.
mm,
And it occurred when we had a business broker who had contacted us, said, "Hey, do you want to value your business?" We said, "Okay." We had never thought about it that way, what it might be worth.
mhm.
And when he gave us the valuation, it was just under $1 million, which back then, that wasn't too bad.
Mhm.
But not enough to go and retire on. So it did that. I would say that at that point, that was one of those times where I looked back at my dad's experience and I said, "Okay, Matt, do I want to get to that day where I just turn off the lights and lock the door
Mm,
and walk away from 20 years of my effort? Or do I want to
mhm.
build something that somebody else would buy that has value
Mhm.
that can be transferred?" And so
Mhm.
as my wife and I, she's my business partner, we worked through that. We said, well, we've got a lot of years of work ahead of us. Why don't we try to figure this out? What can we change to make our business worth more while we're working, working the business as well? So that was kind of the pivot point, transition point for us.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome. So let's talk about what most entrepreneurs don't admit. There's that moment where the business stops feeling exciting and it starts feeling heavy. When did you realize this isn't just about working harder, but something is broken in the structure of which you were performing in?
Well, I don't know if I had faced the reality of that until
Mhm.
point in year 12, but, looking back, it was clear that I had run out of ideas.
Mm.
It's not that we didn't try new things, but it was like we could never get traction. We couldn't quite figure out what was holding us back.
Yeah.
And so saw it at that point was that, okay, I may be smart, I may work hard, but there's something here that I just haven't seen. And that's when I stumbled onto a book that shared this framework, this roadmap, if you would, for
Mhm.
go through these different stages, and that if
Mhm.
you're to that stage, then you don't
Right.
it really resonated. I said, "Okay, I think this has something there's something here."
Wow. And this is where I would love to challenge our audience because a lot of people think scaling is just more sales. I know for me, I was like, why is everyone talking about scaling? But then I understand why. You say something completely different. You say employee count drives complexity, not revenue. Break
Yeah.
that down because that shifts the entire strategy.
Yeah, and I would say that you're right. I think a lot of people focus on the top line, and there's nothing inherently bad about that, but the revenue that your business generates does not correlate as strongly to the complexity of the organization as does looking at the number of people, because it's really the people that create complexity. And the example I
Mhm.
use is, when I was single, my life was pretty simple. I got
Come
married.
on.
Okay, it's more complex. By the time we had our 4th
Yeah.
child, it was chaos, right? And so, we see that in that little microcosm, but that really shows you how adding people to your organization
Yeah.
really adds complexity. And that's what this research showed, was that there were different kind of ranges of employees during which the complexity was kind of in a level, right? And then
Mhm.
you kind of break through kind of the next level of complexity, and then you're at that next level for a while. And so it's kind of this stepped tiers of 7 stages of growth. And what I
Mm.
realized is my business kept on going from stage 1 to stage 2, and then it came back to stage 1.
Stage one.
We would, through attrition or layoff, we'd come back to that.
Yeah.
We could never really figure out why we couldn't sustain that growth. And when I learned the roadmap and the rules that came with it, you talked about misalignment. There was several areas I was totally misaligned on.
Mm.
And what we saw when we became aligned with these rules of growth, we went in 3 years from being stuck for a decade. In 3
Mhm.
years, tripled in revenue. We went from 8 employees to 40, and we we had an offer to buy our business for 10 times what it had been valued at in year 12.
Okay.
Saw this, it felt magical, to be honest, and all I did was kind of take by faith that this roadmap could work. And I think the reason I had gotten to that point is, like I said, I was kind of out of ideas. So
Mm.
if I didn't have any ideas, let me follow something that was based on research that showed what other people had learned.
Mhm.
It was based on research of other business owners and businesses. I thought, okay, well, I should at least give it a try. And when we did, we just saw this explosive growth. But it wasn't just on the revenue, right? We were adding people. It was becoming
Mhm.
more complex, but we knew how it was becoming more complex,
Mhm.
like a doer specialist, to being really the leader of an organization. And I think one thing that causes some business owners to pause and not grow is they say, I'm barely hanging on right now. I don't have any more hours now. How could I
Mm.
double or triple in size? And what I really found is that as the business grew, and it grew in a sustainable manner through the roadmap, we were at 40 employees. I was actually working fewer hours. I was spending
Good.
more
It's good.
on things that I enjoy, as
Yeah.
opposed to still doing for the 12th, 13th, 14th year in a row the same kind of core work and specialist work. I had actually grown into the CEO of a business instead of
Mm.
kind of your most doer of a.
Wow. I love that. So I was thinking, I was like, so people aren't really scaling businesses. They're kind of scaling chaos if they're not careful. Wow.
Well, that's a great point. But yeah, so that's how the roadmap helped me. And after the exiting, using this roadmap, so I wasn't the inventor of it, but after I used the roadmap, I end up acquiring all the research and IP of the inventor and turning
Mm.
it into this thing we now call
Called
organizational re.
rewilding. So
Yeah,
let's get into that framework because this is where things get disruptive, and we're eagerly waiting to get into this organization rewilding. And you compare business to an ecosystem. I keep hearing you say that
right.
with missing elements like wolves in Yellowstone that you shared with us earlier. That's bold. What are instead of adding more effort, because we listened to you come through those ranks saying to us now, "Hey, man, I got to a place where I was able to do more things we love." And that's why a lot of people actually quit on their dream of being a business owner because they're not able to get to that scale themselves up and through and around all those things. So you say we need to restore what's missing. What's
Right.
one missing element you see in most businesses right now that is causing us to be, I would say, from getting to be successful in what we're building?
Yeah. So, what our research had identified is that there are actually 11 elements of an exceptional business. But the good thing is that when you're at that earlier stage, you don't need all 11 because your business isn't that complex yet. By the time you get to stage 7, you do need all 11 elements. So, part of the roadmap is right sizing and focusing your effort on what you need in the now, where you're at today. And being able to say, okay, then what comes next? And you can prepare for that, but you're not wasting things that you don't yet need. So, a couple of things that come in early on. The first is like a business model. And I'm not
Mhm.
talking a business plan, which
Mm.
may be helpful, but a business model is just really intentionally architecting your business, knowing what your products and services are, how you're pricing them so you can manage your margins, understand your customers and the different kinds of customers that you serve,
Mm.
understanding your human capital and resources that way. So it's really kind of getting into the design and architecture of your business. And a lot of
Mhm.
business owners haven't done that because they were never taught that that's needed. And so they launch into something, they have a product or service they're good at, and they just kind of pursue that, which is not a bad initial motivator. But if
But
you're
it's not sustainable. Yeah.
a lot of things get set up in that early business, not by intent, but by happenstance. It just
Right.
happened. It's you don't have anything else to do, and the first time you do something, it's like, okay, that's good enough, and then you continue on. But when you
Right.
don't actually architect your business, it's often that you aren't building enough profitability into your business that really will sustain and generate the capital you need to continue to hire and grow and get machines and all that kind of stuff. So a business model is one of those elements you need right out of the gate. The second element that's helpful in those early stages is having a clear organizational structure. And
Mhm.
bit early, but if you don't know what seats you're trying to fill, what positions
Mm.
you need, it's very easy to hire the wrong people, to be unclear of what your expectations are for your team and even for yourself. And becomes just this big pot or bucket of work that needs to be done. And everybody just has a bucket of miscellaneous stuff that they're carrying around. And it really creates an unproductive environment, and like I
Yes.
said, it's hard to hire the right people because you don't really know the work that they're trying to do. They don't know what work they need to do, and so those 2 elements out of the gate are what we'd say are the highest priority for stage 1. And then as you go along, stage 2, stage 3, etcetera, there's additional elements that get folded in. Things like, do you have clear brand and core values? You need to
Mm.
unify people, and shared values are how you unify people. Things like a business development structure, knowing how marketing, sales, and customer service work together to grow and sustain revenue.
Right.
Even have the business growth framework. That's one of the elements, knowing that you're in stage 1. Am I aligned with the rules for stage 1? And what changes when I get to stage 2? So knowing that roadmap is one of the elements as well.
So that defined process.
Yeah.
Right. One of the things you talk about that is in those elements is the founder dependency. Boy, let me say, Some people might get checked. They know they have a structure. They know who they need to hire. They got their processes, their SOPs, clear niche. They know their marketing, but everything is still built around their presence.
Right.
And I meet people all the time and they're like, I just can't afford to hire anybody. I'm like, but you haven't even tried. It's costing you more not getting someone who is an expert at the Meta platform for doing ads. Like, you
Hmm.
don't know, but you're sitting there for the last 3 weeks telling me you're trying to figure it out. Do you know you can probably hire a freelancer if that's where you start? Just the power of having an expert do one thing for you just to see it sacrificially, you pay it. Then you realize, oh my God, I should have done this my entire life. And you didn't even hire somebody half as good because, hey, freelancers tell you they know how to do a lot of stuff and they can do a little thing, but they never get effective. But just the fact of you like stepping back and you experience it. So talk about that founder dependency aspect and why entrepreneurs, that's really one of the ways where, we actually find ourselves just in a bad place and not able to scale, stuck, bottleneck.
Yeah. So one of the things that the roadmap helps you with, again, is to know what the rules are in your current stage and when things change. And delegation really becomes most important in stage 3 when you have 20 or more employees, 20 to 34 employees. That's where delegation, that's actually the name of stage 3, because the organization, by the time you get 20 people, you can't really manage all of them. You have to start having some supervisors or managers that you're coaching and growing that can take on responsibility for you. But even before that, in stage 1 and stage 2, you're right. You have to be able to delegate. It's a little bit different because the organization's smaller. And
Mm-hmm.
in stage 1 and stage 2, the has a very high percentage of their time being spent on what we call the specialist.
Mm-hmm.
We have this rule called 3 faces of a leader. The 3 faces are visionary, manager, and specialist. And so it's just helping you know how much time you're supposed to be spending each of those
Mm-hmm.
vision, manager, and specialist. And in stage 1, specialist faces weren't half the time. So you are active in the business, and that's okay because you're in theory, you're the expert of your business. And so you can't pull out too early
Mm-hmm.
in and you have to continue to drive how the organization is doing work, but you do want to, as soon as you can, get some of that execution off your plate. And as you mentioned, if there are areas of business development, for example, or bookkeeping that are outside your areas, uh, outsourcing that. No, first of all, understand that that's a position with
Yes.
your organizational structure. That's why you need that. And maybe you're saying, well, maybe for bookkeeping, I'm not going to do that. I'll get a contractor, somebody to outsource that too. But having
Mm-hmm.
that structure really helps you see the opportunity for you not to be wearing quite so many hats, even though you will wear a lot of hats early on in that startup and ramp up phases.
We'll be back after a quick break.
And now an exciting growth opportunity for you.
Hey, Mindset Mastery Moments family. I'm Dr. Kareem Ellis. And if you've been listening to Dr. Lisa, chances are you already know you have a message, a purpose, or an expertise that can make a real difference. The question is, are you positioning yourself and that message in a way that creates impact and greater income? You see, that's exactly what I'm going to be teaching in my free live masterclass titled Why Talented Speakers Stay Broke. I'm going to show you the biggest mistakes talented speakers, coaches, entrepreneurs, and leaders make, and more importantly, how you can avoid it. I'd love for you to join me. Simply visit the gpsspeakersacademy.com/free class to reserve your free seat. And if you are listening to this on your favorite podcast platform, don't worry one bit. The registration link is waiting for you in the episode description. Thank you, Dr. Alisa Whyte, for allowing me to serve your amazing community. And to all the rest of my peeps out there, I can't wait to see you in class.
Wow. And so I love that you see one of the things you said is that really caught my attention is that most dangerous stage is not at the beginning, it's in the middle, right? Can you talk a little bit more about that pivotal stage? Out of the 7 stages you said, most people, I guess I was surprised to hear that you said the most dangerous part is not at the beginning, it's actually in the middle. Can you talk
Yeah.
to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, stage three is you were talking about owner dependency. And what we say is stage one and stage two are owner dependent stages. That's just
Right,
natural,
which is naturally
right?
what it is, yeah.
So that stage one is from 1 to 10 employees. Stage two is 11 to 19. So those two are owner centric. Stage three is this really pivotal stage out of all the seven stages. And it's one of the hardest for founders to get through because it's a transition from owner centric to enterprise centric. And so that's why delegation starts in stage three. The organization is just too complex for the owner to be so involved as they were in stage one and stage two. And so
Mm,
transition, and some business owners, for whatever the reason, struggle to create an enterprise centric organization. They don't feel right about it. Maybe they're the best engineer and they always want to do some engineering and they're never going
mhm,
to give up the engineering. And they don't realize that the business in stage three, the amount of engineering they need to be doing, that specialist face
to
goes
scale.
down a bit. And they have to turn into wearing primarily the manager face in stage
Mm,
three. And some they may not be naturally bent that way. Maybe they don't feel like they have the
right.
right skills. Maybe they just don't enjoy it. And so they kind of pull back into naturally back into stage two where they can stay owner centric and, just kind of hang out there.
And that really translate that stage is where a founder has to decide, I guess, am I the business or am I building a business? Because in the beginning, like you said, I am the
Yeah.
business while in my opinion, I'm building a business.
Right.
But
Right.
when you get that longing and desire comes to where you just wanna take your feet and not have to be the driver, hands on the wheel all the time, but it's almost to where when you're gonna get to that next level, you literally have to step back so you can build
Yeah.
faster, further, higher, deeper, longer is what I say. What happens if you don't make that shift, that in the mindset? What does that look like?
Well, essentially what happens in our viewpoint is you get misaligned with the rules of growth. And so since you're working against those rules, it creates a headwind for you
Mhm.
and you will get stuck. The analogy I use is, I'm in Colorado and I like to hike up Keeners, so 14,000-foot peaks here in Colorado. And when I start at the trailhead, with my backpack, I don't bend down and fill that backpack with a bunch of rocks to make my backpack heavy, right? No, I want a light backpack because it's going to be a hard journey. I know that from the start. And that's what it's like when you start off with a business. You are on
Mm.
that trailhead, you're going to make it to that peak and you're committed to it. But with this heavy backpack, you get up onto that mountain a bit and all of a
Mhm.
sudden, growth, continue moving forward, just gets harder and harder. And at some
Mhm.
point, because you are misaligned and you have this heavy backpack, growth just is too hard. And so you just stop. You stop somewhere on that mountain. You can
Mhm.
see the peak, but you realize you're never going to make it where you thought you
Mm.
were going to go. And it's very
Wow.
disheartening.
Mhm.
But when you get stuck there, a lot of times, oddly enough, you don't have a lot of options. You have so much energy and money into the business. Maybe it's giving you a decent income, but not as much as
Yeah.
you were hoping. And so you're stuck there. And in some ways you feel a bit powerless. You're
Right.
working hard as ever. And the reality is if you just empty that backpack, you could start up that mountain again. But
Mhm.
for so many business owners, I was there 10 years stuck on that mountain in stage one, working hard. I wasn't sure there was any other answers. Now, I am
Right.
inquisitive enough and open enough that I can admit, when I hear a good idea, I will take it.
Mhm.
And so if a business owner is willing to do that, to say,
Mhm.
okay, I know I've tried it for decades maybe, but there might be some other way to do things. If they're open to that,
Mhm.
they can
Yeah.
empty their backpack and start growing again. I was stuck for a decade, and 3 years later, found the roadmap. We had tripled the
Wow.
business. I mean, it
Wow.
was it was like I said, it was just, almost miraculous in from where we were
Yeah.
standing in year 12.
Wow. What would you say to two different sets of the entrepreneur, two different phases? The one who's right there, phase one or two, where they are the business, but they feel so frustrated because they are stagnant and they're also a bit burnout. What would you say to them?
I was there. I relate to you. I mean, the idea of being burnt out, I was there. I'd only had like 3 jobs before I had a business,
Right.
professional
That's
jobs.
right.
I
Yeah.
had been, 5, 6 years into my career at each of these places. I had
Yeah.
invested and been successful there. I was 12 years into a business, so it was much longer. I would say
Mm-hmm.
when you own your own business, time flies, so it didn't feel like that long, but
It does.
the idea of just another year like the last year, it just wasn't as
Chalk
exciting.
on a board, chalk on a blackboard. I mean,
Yeah,
speech in hands.
I was getting tired of it. And it was like, okay, what am I missing here? And that's why I think I leapt so quickly into following the roadmap because it was like, okay, these are things I've not tried. I hadn't even thought about trying. These are whole areas I hadn't even knew to try about. So it was
Mm-hmm.
brand new and it gave me a lot of things and it showed me where I was misaligned. So I quickly unloaded my backpack and said, okay, I want
Moved.
to go again. It's hard to believe that that can happen. I understand there. I was there in year 12 that things can really change and that they can get better. I'm
Wow.
saying they can. You have to be willing to change though.
You have to be willing. And then for thing number one is don't quit. And thing number two for me is don't keep doing the same things you've been doing. And don't
Well,
try to go it alone.
yeah, one of the inventor had one of his sayings was if you want things to change, then something has to change. Okay, that's kind of a play on words, but it says, the point is that if you want things to change, something has to change. You can't just keep on doing it the same way.
Hmm.
And I felt that that's what the roadmap helped me with. As a business owner, I was willing to do anything, you know, morally that was in my moral uh, framework
Yeah.
be successful in my business. It wasn't a lack
Right.
of willingness. It was a
Right.
lack of knowing what to do. And so when I saw this roadmap and it said, okay, here's things simple, this isn't rocket science, here's some things you need to change. It's like, okay, I can do that. And then things started to improve and I said, okay, I can continue to change. I just
Hmm.
didn't I needed to change. And that's was really I think the benefit of this research that I could say, okay, I can try that. And when I had success, it just encouraged embracing it even more.
Right. Wow. So good. Now it's time to flip the script because every leader has a moment where they had to shift how they think to get where they are. And
Right.
Matthew, what was one moment? Where were you and what did you have to flip in your mindset and how did that change everything? I mean, you already shared one big one with us, but I know there's another one in there as you got higher on
Yeah.
the scale.
Well, some of the people say, well, okay, Matt, how did this roadmap help you? What did you really change? And the example
Mhm.
I give them is within the roadmap, there are these rules, okay? And the rules, or what we call a dimension, kind of a rule set, are
Mhm.
goes across all stages. So there's one rule, but what you need to do within that stage of growth for that rule changes.
Mhm.
And so
Right.
the, this rule is called gates of focus. And it
Mm.
basically says, how do you prioritize people, process, and profit? Those 3 P's are always important. But what the research showed is that there's an optimal prioritization based on your stage of growth for you to grow. And if you're
Right.
misaligned here on the gate of focus, your business often just gets stuck. It just cannot grow. And
Mm.
so this was when I said there was misalignment, this is the area that just jumped off the paper. And it's like, okay, Matt, you're doing this totally wrong. So
Yeah.
my background, I'm a data scientist. So I'm analytical. I love process. And so I always thought, hey, if I build the best mousetrap, invest in process and systems and doing it well. And so I made that my number one. Number two is people for me. And I have the right people, then profit will come. So that's how I ran my business for 12 years. I was focused
Mm.
us, then people. and then profit.
Profits. Yep. That's a good one.
I think that is a bit of a carryover because my parents struggled financially in kind of those formative high school years. I kind of saw the idea of making money and being successful financially. There was
Yes,
kind of some negative connotation on that. And
it
so
is.
I thought, okay, I'm not going to focus there. I should focus on process and people. Well,
Mm-hmm.
instead, that's not what the rule book says. The roadmap says profit is number one, people are second, process is third. I had it totally inverted. And for me, it's a little bit of that. You were asking when that mind switch was, and it
Mm-hmm.
was have to be okay with being successful financially. That was
Mm.
really the mental shift it took in me. And so we came up with this phrase for our team at that time. And we said, we're going to make buckets of money. That became our
Uh,
phrase. We made fun,
buckets of
not fun. We had fun with it. And the idea,
yeah.
let's just make buckets of money together. And so it
Yeah.
took away this negative connotation of being profitable. And that was the mind shift. But then the action change that came out of that was instead of building more internal systems and processes, we took all of our people and made them all outbound business development folks. We turned their
What?
talents we're using for internal services to our
Right.
and we turned them externally. We had a call center is one of the services we had for our clients. Well, we turned them
Mm-hmm.
on marketing calling and we made
Wow.
15,000 outbound calls in 1 year with a small team. And it totally revolutionized. We went from 2 proposals a month to 1 every business day of the year. And that's
What?
all that explosive growth. But it started with the roadmap that says, okay, Matt, profit is first, not process.
Yeah.
I,
Wow.
I had to accept that. But like I said, as a business owner, I'm willing to do anything, but I just need to be shown a little bit of
You know a
guidance.
bit about what it is to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That was I would say is the most meaningful mindset with that. Okay, it's okay to be financially successful. And okay, then how does our team react to by making profit our really growth driver as a stage one
Right.
business?
So important. Very good. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
What is success to you now compared to what it used to be?
Well, I would say because we had a good exit, those first 12 years, we went months, sometimes half a year without taking a salary. So,
Wow.
it was tight. Things were tight. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and to not have to worry about that and really just enjoy building organizations and helping other business owners, that's really what I define as success. My family has always been kind of my hobby. That's really the only hobby I enjoy spending time with my kids, their spouses, and we have got a bunch of grandkids, and
You
that's
look
success
so
to me.
young. Like I was not expecting grandkids.
Yeah, well, we just enjoy that. I think my wife gets tired of them a little bit sooner than I do. But we just have it's just chaos when everybody's over. But those two things I would say is spending time with
Yeah.
my kids and grandkids, and my wife and I travel more.
Mm-hmm.
Just building businesses. We enjoy doing that even today.
Right. Wow. So, mindset bites to go. This is your moment. You're going to have 90 seconds. Someone listening right now, they're building something, but it's messy. What do they need to hear from you and how they can implement the rewilding system for their own success? I'm going to step away from the mic and the camera. It's just going to be you and the listeners and viewers. Here we go.
Well, the first thing I would do to find yourself in a point of chaos and maybe even doubt is very common, right? It's a very small portion of the population who will ever have enough courage to start their own business. So, kudos to you to having the courage to first step into the arena. I would say don't try to figure this out on your own. You can try through trial and error, but trial and error is very expensive. A lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of dead ends. So, um, I would say learn what your stage of growth is. We've got a calculator on our website. You can calculate your stage. And then we have guidebooks for each stage of growth. And it's an hour read. It'll be one of the best hours you spent learning about your business and the rules of growth. And then maybe just take a little bit on faith. Start aligning to the rules as they're laid out for you. And you'll find that your backpack gets lighter. It won't solve every problem. You're still going to have to work hard. You're still going to have to think about your customers and the products and your pricing. So you have a lot of decisions you still have to make. But it'll reveal these hidden barriers that are contributing to your frustration. And like I said, when you start to align with those, you'll find your backpack gets lighter and taking that next step up the mountain to reach that peak, however high that peak is. You don't have to get to stage 7. You might be fine with a stage 2 business. That's totally fine. But don't stop before you reach the level that you want it to be. And I think this roadmap will give you a lot of insight that you're lacking today. I know I was lacking it after 12 years, business degrees, working for big companies. I hadn't figured it out either. So don't beat yourself for that, but be willing to look at something new and consider how it can get you moving up that mountainside again.
So good. Oh my. Thank you so much, Matthew. That is so awesome. Focus on structure, understand every stage, and stop guessing. And Matt has put together a full system to help us get away from being in that space of being bottlenecked, discouraged, and suffering with burnout. This was one of those conversations where if you really listened, you just saved yourself years of frustration. Definitely, because building a business isn't just about growth, it's about growing right. So, Matthew, thank you so much for bringing strategy and truth. Tell us how you would like for us to connect with you. And we'll also have the links and things in the description wherever they're listening, watching this. I think you have the download of the steps and phases on your website as well.
Yeah, go to the website. There'll be a button where you can calculate your stage of growth. Once you have that, it'll direct you to stage-specific resources. And that's the whole benefit of the system is that it's right sized to where you are, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to be thinking like a corporate CEO. Don't worry about that. You're stage 1 or stage 2, stage 3 business. Get the resources that are stage specific. Focus on those areas. And you can kind of cut out all the noise, block out all of the noise outside of that. And that's one of the nice things too, is it helps you see what you don't need to worry about, at least yet. So
Exactly.
yeah, I'd say go to the website. I'm on LinkedIn. Welcome to, one of my favorite things to do as the founder of ReWild Group is to spend time speaking with other business owners. So we have the ability to set up a time with me. I'd love to speak with anybody. And if I can share and point you to some resources that can help you, I'd be glad to do that.
Absolutely. Wow. So make sure you connect with Matthew and the ReWild Group. And if this episode shifted your thinking, don't keep it to yourself. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and make sure you share it with someone who is in the business. If they're starting off, even better. You know why? Because Matthew will save them a lot of years. I know I wish Matthew was around a few years ago. And I've kind of learned the hard way, went to the school of the hard knocks and still learning. So a lot of gems and wisdom came from you today, Matthew. Thank you so, so much.
Thanks, Alisa. I really appreciate you taking the time for allowing me to share my story.
Yeah, your story and a lot of wisdom that's so needed for every kind of entrepreneur. Listen, disruptors, you know what to do. Reach out to Matthew. Let him know you heard him here. Go to his websites in the link wherever you're watching or listening to this episode. And we'd love to know how rewilding is a tool that's changing the way you look at yourself and your role in the business and vision that you're building. Until next time, keep mastering your mindset. Think, speak, do, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye now.